Next, let us talk about the effective assessment. These are the characteristics of effective assessment. Your assessment needs to be effective, as this is going to provide you data reflecting the level of attainments of the students, whether the students can keep up with the learning or not. Now you will also need the assessment result for you to evaluate the course and the program in order to identify the rooms for improvements. All these are conditional to the effective assessment. If the assessment is ineffective, there will be a lot of noise, a lot of misleading, and also confusions. And this shall directly influence your effort to improve the program. Let us look at the characteristic of effective assessment. An assessment must fit the purpose of the assessment. The purpose is helping the students to learn. This may seem to be very simple. However, in the reality, many lecturers, especially young lecturers, sometimes even experienced lecturers, will have problems recognizing this. Sometimes you see lecturers purposely set the assessment to be extremely difficult just to show that how knowledgeable they are, or indicate to their peers they have very high standards and they feel proud of that. Now, the entire goal of this assessment is not really helping the students to learn. Another example, sometimes you also see lecturers during the teaching and learning purposely hiding something from the students, pay little emphasis or intentionally avoid it, and then suddenly the relevant topic came out in the final exam. I'm not saying that they have the intentions to sabotage the students. Very often, they would like to see the students reaching to the intended level on their own instead of hand-to-hand guidance. Now, if the focus of the discussion here is whether to spoon-feed the students, this will be quite arguable. Some lecturers choose to spoon-feed the students. Some lecturers expect the students to work out everything by themselves. Personally, I feel this is just the methods of teaching and learning, which is flexible among the lecturers. If you feel spoon-feeding to the students is more suitable in helping the students to learn fast, it is okay. And very often, spoon-feeding leads to immediate effect, particularly in terms of the cognitive level C1 to C3 or probably C4. Now, if you're talking about C5 and C6, spoon-feeding may not be effective. The mode of teaching and learning may need to be transformed into facilitations, supervisions, and guidance. These are the teaching and learning part, which is flexible and dependent on the situations. Now, the scenario just now was the lecturer purposely hide something from the students during the teaching and learning activities. Now, suddenly, the relevant topic came out in the final exam, and students are expected to quickly upgrade their level in order to meet the requirement within that 3 hours durations of the final exam. First, the final exam is not a formative assessment. It is a summative assessment. It is not really helping the students to learn. The main functions of the summative assessment is to grade the levels of the students. Second, if you are looking for the higher levels of thinking orders, you need to train them first before they are being assessed. You can use similar topics and different scenarios in training them to have the elements of higher thinking orders before comes to the real assessment. Now, if you don't train them, it comes up suddenly in the final exam. There will be a process of trying and error, Bright students may eventually reach there, probably require longer time. Now you have to see if you have provided sufficient time for the students reaching to the level you intend to. Now coming back to the purpose of the assessment here, you are helping the students to learn. You are facilitating the learning process there, and you actually want the students to improve. Therefore, you will need to reconsider the so-called sabotaging the students with something that you never taught in the class, but eventually came out in final exam without any alarm. Now the second characteristic, it will be the coherence. This one is referring to the golden triangle. You need to make sure the course learning outcome, teaching and learning activities, as well as the assessment strategies are in line. We discussed about this in our previous video. Next, it will be variety. You need a good variety in terms of the assessment while assessing the course learning outcome. The main reason here is you would like to minimize the bias, and you would like to make a more thorough assessment using one assessment method to counter-check with another assessment method. This shall help you to identify whether you have problem with your assessment as well. Now, if your assessments are very focused on certain things, you might not be able to omit certain factors that may influence the performance of the students. Let's say now one of your course learning outcome, there will only be one single assessment, which is the final exam. Let's say now a student is sick during the final exam and he cannot perform well during the final exam. Since there is only one assessment method, that particular assessment method becomes the only reference deciding the students whether he can attain the relevant course learning outcome. The students may actually know how to attain that. It is possible that students can actually attain the course learning outcome. However, due to his illness, his performance in the final exam is affected. This leads to inaccurate measurements in your assessment. Now, a good variety here should theoretically have more than one assessment for one particular course learning outcome. The ideal number, it would be 2 to 3 assessments. You do not like the assessments to be too much. When it is excessive, this imposes a lot of workload to you as a lecturer. At the same time, it imposes a lot of pressures to the students, and it makes the learnings to be extremely rigid, always chasing time to meet the assessment. Now the point here is you need a variety in the assessment, and that variety should be a good variety which is not too excessive. Next is about the definitions of this variety. Depending on the situations, you can have 2 assessments with similar nature. Make sure it is more than 1. Or you may have 2 assessments with different nature. Again, it is more than 1. And when the assessments have different nature, it analyzes the performance of the students from different perspectives, which is likely to be less biased. Now, the assessments of similar nature include the progress tests and final examinations. Those are written tests with limited time given. Now, the assessment with different nature include the final exam, assignment, presentations, and so on and so forth. Different skill set may be required by the students in order to fulfill the relevant assessment. Sometimes students may have problems with presentations. They have the relevant knowledge but unable to present well. Now, if you use another mode of assessment, let's say the assignment, Different type of skill is required, which is the writing skill to demonstrate the attainments of the students related to certain topic. Next is about the clarities. To make the assessment effective, you will need to make the expectations and the assessment criteria clear to the students. This should be transparent to the students so that they know what are the expectations. Sometimes you see lecturers do not like to disclose what are the criteria of the assessment. Not knowing the criteria of the assessment, students may not be able to meet your expectations, as you do not disclose to them to which level they need to achieve. Normally, we will encourage the lecturer, especially when give the students assignment, make sure the expectations, assessment criteria, rubrics are all disclosed to the students from the first day that you give the assignment. You should also encourage the students to read through those expectations. You see many students also ignore that even though you give them the criteria. They cannot make sense of the levels of expectations based on those criteria from the perspective of the students. You should also guide them, make sure they know your expectations of their works, giving them some directions so that they learn in the proper way, right focus, and meeting your expectations. Next, effective assessment will provide timely feedback to the students. You need to let the students know their level of achievement, make known to the students their mistakes, their problems, their rooms of improvement, and so on and so forth. Don't just give them a grade without any feedback. This goes back to the purpose of the assessment. You want the students to learn. Now, if you notice error there, you will need to help the students to rectify it so that they can learn from the process. This is another common mistake by the lecturer. Very often, you will also see students are not interested either with your feedback. You will see many lecturers, they consider the progress test as the summative assessment. Students submit their assignment report, receive the grade at the end of the semester without any feedback. You will also see many students that are not interested either. Let's say now you've done the progress test. You are so eager to discuss the questions related to the progress test. Students pay no attention on that. Now this is not really helping the students to learn either. It could be problem with the teaching and learning activities. You might need to think of a creative way to facilitate learnings from the students after they've done the formative assessment. Otherwise, your assessment become ineffective. It will only meant for grading, which is not at its best conditions, and contribute very little to help the students to learn. Next is about the adequacy. We are talking about effective assessment. That means the assessment should not be excessive. It should be just nice. Not too little, not too much. Too much assessment is unnecessary, and this may be counterproductive. Personally, I feel that this is the common problem in the education. Academicians like data and information. Very often, academicians do not rely on one single data to make the decision. They like as many data as possible so that they can cross-check each other while doing the evaluations in terms of the performance of the course and the program. And because of this, there will be many assessments throughout the semester, every single course, throughout the entire program. As a consequence, a lot of emphasis and efforts are put into the assessment. A majority of time are spent in analyzing the assessment results. Very little effort are put into improving the teaching and learnings of that particular course. This is the meaning of counterproductive. You need to bear in mind that we are looking for an effective assessment. Having the redundancy among the assessment methods is not effective. Now, if the assessment is too little, you do not have sufficient information to make good decisions for you to improve the program. But when it is too many, the focus of the efforts skew towards something which is not necessary. And this is often happen in the academic field. It doesn't mean that you have more assessment, you are more hardworking. It doesn't mean that you have less assessment, you do not care about the students' learning. What we are talking about here is, if you put 100% effort into certain thing, you must at least acquire the outcome more than 100. Whatever redundant, you have to remove it. A really effective assessment will have the least number of assessment, giving you the most reliable result. Next is about justified. We are talking about the justifiable assessment outcomes. Now, when you done the assessment, there will be assessment results. These results need to be properly verified. Is it reliable? Is it accurate? Whether the assessment outcomes are justifiable. You know that the assessment can easily be manipulated. If you want more students to perform well, you can simply lower down the expectations and the requirement. The students will perform exceptionally well in the entire class. Now, is this justifiable? You may also say that you have very high requirement to distinguish yourself from your colleagues, trying to prove that you are more hardworking, you are better than the others. Now you purposely make your assessment to be extremely difficult to score, making your course a killer subject, so that many students will fail your course. They have to come back again. If they don't work hard enough, they cannot get through the course, which your requirements is excessively high, much higher than what is expected out of that particular course. Now, is this justifiable? When it comes to the teaching and learning, as a lecturer, you need to consider yourself servicing the students. Nowadays, the mode of education is not you at the top and the students are at the bottom. Nowadays, students have their own rights. We are helping them to learn. You need to be professional, but not to be personal. You may have your own standing. You embrace certain characteristics which you would like to see among the students. This is totally okay. But the entire purpose here is helping the students to learn. Being a lecturer is not to show that how knowledgeable you are. Those are secondary. The priority, it will be how effective you can teach the students. Making the complicated things to be easily understood is a technique. A person can be very knowledgeable, which at the same time can make complicated things to be easily understood. That should be your ultimate goal. Let's say now in our engineering field, you can consider yourself as a lecturer. What are the differences between lecturers with knowledge of engineering versus the engineers practicing in the industry? What are the main job scope of the lecturer and the main job scope of engineers? The main job scope of lecturer is giving lecture, training future engineers, and the target students, they do not have prior knowledge of the respective course or the topic before you teach them. Now your ultimate goal here is to make them understand, to help them to learn, to equip them with necessary knowledge and skill so that they can perform well in the industry. Now you will need to function as a proper lecturer teaching the students. Next, it will be systematic. There should be systematic analysis of students' performance on assessed tasks. The purpose of having the analysis to be systematic, it is so that it is easily traceable. It allows you to quickly identify where are the weaknesses of the students, and so on and so forth. Having so many characteristics of effective assessment, if we follow one by one here, you should be able to produce really good assessment. But you know that in the reality, there are many problems. You can take this as a checking tools for you to evaluate your assessment methods. Make sure it fulfills the purpose of helping the students to learn. Have a good variety in terms of the assessment in order to minimize the bias. Not to be too excessive. That skew the focus towards something which is not important. And also make sure everything are well in line so that the course that you teach meeting the purpose as a part of the program, producing the graduate with relevant skills and knowledge.